highs and lows from making my first game. Development is winding down on my first indie game, Witchhazel Woods, and I've been reflecting on the whole adventure. After working on it for about 2 years, I'm happy that I've managed to just about finish a project of this size, and I'm proud of what I've built. But as this is my first game, I do feel I've made some missteps, and there are things I would definitely do differently in a subsequent project. Maybe you can learn from my mistakes. First, a little background about the game and about me. Witchhazel Woods is an adventure game where you play as a teenage girl who's camping with her dog. During a game of fetch, your dog runs off into the woods and gets lost. To save her, you must venture into the woods armed only with the twig you had thrown. In the woods, you meet an array of increasingly strange creatures. However, most of the woods critters are friendly and are dealing with problems of their own. You can help each other out by trading items with them. One of the creatures will be able to make use of your twig and will trade you something else in return. That item will then turn out to be the key to solving another critter's problem, and so on. As you trade up, you'll be able to access new areas and make better trades until finally you uncover the key to saving your dog. Although this is my first game, I came into it with some pre-existing skills that definitely helped out a lot. I work professionally as a data engineer, so I'm certainly no stranger to code. And I've been using a drawing tablet to make digital art since I was a teenager. Really, it was the fact that I already had many of the necessary skills to make a game that prompted me to get into game dev in the first place. Good call. Starting small. If you're thinking about making a game, an obvious first step is to read advice from people who have already made games. I did less of this than I probably should have, but the one piece of advice that was too pervasive to miss was start small. Making even a simple game is a stunningly huge task, especially if you're doing it solo. If you have an ambitious idea, it might make sense to hold off on making the game until after you've made something smaller first. You'll gain some wisdom that will help your bigger project from becoming a spaghetti code nightmare. You'll have a better sense for how long things take, and you will experience the satisfaction of completing something, rather than burning yourself out early on a project that seems never ending. Witchhazel Woods is a simple game. It will take most players less than an hour and a half to play through. There's no physics, you can't even jump. There's no combat. For the most part, you kinda just walk around and talk to other characters. But it has still taken me about 2 years to make it. Much more than I expected, in large part because of the amount of art assets that were required. I grossly underestimated how much of my time would be spent on art. Humans are bad at estimation. Bad call. Waiting a long time to test on other computers. The number one thing I did wrong was not always adhering to a fail-fast strategy. When taking on any big project, it's a good idea to tackle the highest risk things first, so that you find out about any showstoppers before you've already sunk untold hours. I know this from my work as a data engineer, and yet I didn't play my game on anyone else's computer until over a year into development. When I loaded it up for the first time on my boyfriend's laptop, which has a different operating system and a much larger screen resolution than mine, I was horrified to find that it performed like crap. This is a problem I would have needed to tackle, regardless of when I uncovered it, and I did successfully get it running much smoother. But because I waited so long, the weeks I spent addressing this performance issue were accompanied by some severe angst. I cannot have spent a year of my life on this only to be unable to release it. No, 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 no! Additionally, the problems you uncover might require a complete overhaul of fundamental parts of your code's design, which will be much harder to do on a larger, more mature code base. Save yourself this stress and test on other machines early. I recommend doing so no later than when you complete the first level of your game. Good call. Planning early for how to handle different displays. Luckily, despite my failure to test on other machines early, I did go into the project keeping in mind that my game would be played on all sorts of different screen resolutions, and I planned for that. To be specific, the vertical axis of my game is percentage-based, meaning that the ground and sky will each take up the same amount of real estate on your screen regardless of the size of your display. While the horizontal axis is absolute, meaning that the wider your display is, the less side-scrolling you will experience. Also, since the game is in a pixel art style, I have built in some logic to change the magnification of the art depending on the display size, meaning that for smaller displays, a single unit of each sprite will be a 2x2 pixel square, but on larger displays it may be as large as 5x5. The end result is that the sprites appear to be approximately the same size regardless of what resolution your display is. I do have some regrets about the specific system I chose. Handling the vertical and horizontal axes in two different ways has created some serious headaches, but I am very, very glad that I put thought into the variability of screen sizes starting from the very beginning. These kinds of design decisions are so fundamental that they would be very hard to change at a later stage. Bad call. DIY state management. There is so much state to manage in even a simple game. This is one area where I wish I had done some research into patterns and advice for dealing with state elegantly, rather than just diving in and assuming I'd be able to come up with something on my own that would work fine. I brought an object-oriented mindset to my game code, so each NPC character is its own class, and all character classes all inherit from an NPC parent class. The state related to a particular character naturally is stored on that character object. This has worked fine in some ways, but I wish I had considered earlier on that each character doesn't have to own its own state. There's no technical reason why I couldn't, for example, store all character state on a single object whose job it is to manage state. I think this would have been a better approach for several reasons. The first is something that may be specific to the game engine I'm using, which is GameMaker Studio 2. Storing important state that needs to be durable on the characters themselves forced me to make each of the character classes persistent, meaning that all the character objects exist at all times regardless of whether they are located in the room that the player is currently in. This means that each character's step event is executing on every frame, and the game engine is also checking for collisions with every character on every frame. A lot of this is unnecessary, so the game code isn't as efficient as it could be. The other reason I wish I had handled game state in this way is because it has been quite grueling to compile a complete list of every important piece of state in the game so that I can properly store it when the player saves their game. If all of the state were in one place, it would be much easier to stay more aware of all of it. Good call. Prioritizing sustainability. For me, game dev is a hobby that I do on top of working full-time as a data engineer. So, I write code all day, and then at night I log off from my work computer and I sit down at a different computer and I write different code. This is frankly a recipe for burnout, and if you want to make a game under similar circumstances, you need to be very intentional and careful about managing your burnout. All along, I have prioritized setting habits and routines that are sustainable over trying to progress through the game development quickly. This has been a good call, and I can confidently say I would not have been able to see this project through to the end otherwise. Here are some very specific things I have done to prioritize sustainability. I have not at any point set any kind of explicit goal about when the game will be done by, or how much time I will devote to it in a given week. On weeks when my job is particularly draining, I might not work on the game at all. It'll get done when it gets done. One benefit to being a solo dev is that you are not accountable to anybody and you have complete freedom to set your own pace. I usually have the TV on while I'm working on my game. For some people, programming with any kind of distraction just isn't possible, but I'm not one of those people. I'm sure I could work more efficiently if my attention weren't divided, but I also wouldn't enjoy my dev time as much, and so maintaining motivation would be harder. I switch between types of work intentionally. Maybe the thing that needs to happen the most urgently right now is a particular programming task, but I just had a long day at work, so I'm going to work on a low-priority art asset tonight instead. Luckily, solo game dev is full of many different types of work, so you can afford to be sick of one of them at any given time without losing all momentum. Good call. Making a game just to make a game. I would not recommend making a game if you do not think you will enjoy the process of making a game. By this I mean, if your main motivator is the money you think you will make from the game sales, a cool project for your resume, the desire to be a person who has made a game, or anything else that is related to the end product and not the process, I do not think you will have a good time. Again, making a game takes a very long time. It's just too much of your life to devote to something if you are not enjoying it. And sorry to be a downer, but there are a lot of indie games out there and only a small percentage of them are commercially successful. It takes a lot of work and energy for a payoff that may never come. I won't pretend I have loved every moment of the game dev journey, but overall, I am doing this mainly because it is fun and I want to. I hope my game will sell, but I won't feel like I have wasted the last 2 years of my life if it doesn't. Witchhazel Woods is available for wishlisting on Steam now, and I'm aiming to release it soon. Your support in the form of a wish list and/or sharing this article would be hugely appreciated.